Okay. We are going to get started on this. And again, these are recorded and they will be on the ETC website. So if you do want to go in and watch the videos, you're more than welcome to. You can just have a refresher of this if you'd like. So what I want to start with today, and we will get into Moodle later, and I'll show you a few things, tips and tricks, and how to turn things on and the clicking part of today. But first I wanted to show you a few things with planning out your activities in Moodle. So again, I think you're probably starting to see kind of a theme of this, that trying to do a lot of the planning ahead of time before you get into Moodle. Then all you really have to worry about is just the technical setup. You're not worrying so much about what am I trying to do, what am I trying to accomplish, what objectives do I want the students to reach, what goals am I trying to do. You've done all that ahead of time, and then it's just doing it in Moodle. So I will share the PowerPoint with you after we're done, but we'll just go through this and we'll talk about some of these things that are on here. So this kind of gives you a little formula you can use to help your students. And with all of your activities, you're always trying to do this active learning. You want them to be involved with the material, either actively participating even just with themselves, or actively participating with you or with each other. You don't want to just give them the kind of activities where they take the information and regurgitate it back, where it's just simple fill in the blank, multiple choice, true and false. Those do have their uses and they do have their strengths, but you want to try to move beyond that, where the students are getting more application and thinking deeper about the content. So for that meaningful and higher ordered learning, there's really the three pieces. So learning equals P plus Q plus R. So P is the programming, the course materials. Is there a textbook? Is there a module? Are you using PowerPoints? Are you doing stuff in Moodle? What do the students need to learn? What materials can you give them? Q then are the questions. You want to try to ask them questions to get deeper and thinking more about the activity itself. And then R is the reflection and kind of the action. So they have to get a little bit deeper, they have to think a little bit more. So you can see there are great questions, should evoke thoughtful reflections, and could consider the current problem or desired goal. So if you have those three things, so the course materials, what question are you going to ask them? So if you're just teaching the materials and you ask them the question, true and false, multiple choice, fill in the blank, you're not getting to that R. The R is more of the application, the case studies, the scenarios, getting them to try to think and figure out the answer to the question rather than just regurgitating material back to you. And then also in Moodle, if you're trying to move to that kind of that reflection piece, getting them to think a little bit deeper, more involved with the content, they also need to have that safe learning environment so they know they can try things out. It's okay if they get it wrong. You give them feedback so that they can learn what they did wrong and then move forward from that. So really the assessment in your assignments should be allowing your students to basically learn from their mistakes. So giving them the feedback, giving them the opportunities, giving them those things to practice. So like I said, learning activities should be designed where they can unlearn incorrect assumptions. But to do that, they have to get feedback so that they know if they got it right or wrong, why is it right or wrong, and then they can move from that point. They're going to need some help with that, especially if you have guys coming in that you probably have seen this where they've learned something on the farm from their dad or their grandpa, and they're coming in and that's not the way that you want them to do it. They have those assumptions, they have that pre-knowledge coming in. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. So you are going to have to give them your feedback and kind of that direction to help them learn that they may need to unlearn some information. But you also need to give them opportunities to see what do they already know, what do I need to help them unlearn to get to that end result of what they need to know in the course. So really a lot of those activities, learning activities, you can do them for marks or they don't have to be for marks, but it's just a way for you then to kind of check and assess and see where your students are at and then see what you need to do to get to that end outcome or objective that you want your students to reach. So designing effective learning activities. Now, and we talked about, actually no, I'm using this backwards design. I'm working on there's going to be just like a noon-hour session on just doing assessment and feedback, nothing to do with Moodle, just kind of similar to the one that we did at the beginning of the year on designing lesson plans. We're going to have another one coming up on assessment and feedback. And that backwards design is something I find works really well when you're doing your assessments. So figure out what are the objectives, and if you are working on any Olds College programming or your apprenticeship program, all your objectives are laid out there for you. You may need to break those down a little bit smaller, but for the most part, you know if the students need to be describing, explaining, creating, building, taking things apart. You know your objectives. Then what you should really be doing then is like, okay, if I know they have to describe how this motor runs, how am I going to assess it? Am I going to do it as a written test? Am I going to have them do an oral presentation? Am I going to have them actually do it? They have to take it apart, put it back together. What is the most logical way to assess what that outcome is? If the outcome is saying to describe or explain something, it's probably a written kind of a question, or maybe it's where they orally tell you back how to do it. If the objective says build something, create something, explain something, then you might want to give them the opportunities where they actually are building it. So make sure your activities and your assessments match to your objectives. And it's not necessarily even getting right into, I'm going to write all these multiple choice questions. You might just decide, I'll do a multiple choice test. When I get to that point, then I'll make sure I have all the questions ready. But just understanding that what are the assessments I want to use to match the objectives. Then once I've done that, then okay, for this activity, they actually have to take apart a motor, put it back together. I have to teach them how to do that. So then once you have the assessment, you know the end goal, then how are you going to teach them to get to that point? So that's really what backwards design is. And you can even Google backwards design, and you will find a lot of this information. There's lots of it out there. With the learning activities, make sure it's language they can understand. Make sure it's language that you've used in class. You don't want to throw out new vocabulary and new terms in an assignment. Make sure you've introduced it and they're familiar with it. Action learning or inquiry-based learning, it's just more of that kind of giving them a question or giving them a problem to solve or giving them a scenario or a case study or something like that where they have to try to figure out the answer to it rather than just, what is the answer? Pick A, B, C, D. You're just trying to get a little bit deeper into their thinking process. And another thing to think of when you're building your learning activities is always that return on attention. Students are going to always want to know, why do I need to do this? Is this going to be on the test later? Is this important? Why do we need to do this? So if you build your activities and show them the value of the activities and show especially if they're smaller pieces, that this builds on the next one and so on, they're going to start to realize that these are important pieces that you're asking them to do, and it is going to help them into the future. So you don't want to just have these arbitrary random kinds of activities where it's just something to fill the time. You want to show them that it's worth their attention and it's worth their time. And you can show them what the objectives are. You can have that up front, and really in your Moodle course it's easy just to type them in there and just say, for this topic, the objectives I want you guys to be able to reach at the end are these 3 or 4 things. You can take them right out of your apprenticeship materials, right out of the courses, out of the competency profile. And then also with your learning activities, again, kind of that flow, where does it make sense? That return on attention, again, kind of falls into this. Have it make sense for them. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this one now? And then we're going to do another one next week and another one the week later. What's the flow? What is the reason that we're doing this? And then if they see the flow and they see how it's all connected, it's really going to help with that developing the learning processes. That positive and safe learning environment, they know they can make mistakes, especially when you build activities that don't necessarily have a mark value. Maybe they're just marked out of 0. You're not necessarily giving them a percentage, but just knowing that, okay, I can try this one here. If I do really bad on it, it's okay. I don't have the assignment until next week. I don't have the big test coming up until next week. You don't want to kind of hide your assignments hide your assessment of your students until when it comes to the big quizzes and the big final exam and the big assignments. Give them opportunities to try things out, give them some feedback. It might just be working on things in class that to them it's not an assignment, but you are watching them, seeing how they're doing it. You give them feedback and say, no, you need to do it this way. Work with a partner, see if you guys can figure out why this isn't working, give each other some feedback. So just give them opportunities to try things out before it really counts in the end. You want them to try to have those new ideas, thoughts, strategies, and really it's that feedback. If students are just doing things for you and you're not giving them any reasons or giving them any feedback why, they really aren't going to see the value in it. So that's a big one. Okay, so with learning activities, so make sure you know and they know kind of what's the context, What is the subject that I want to try to teach? Who are my participants? Am I working with first-year students who have been here just a week, or are these second-year students who are almost done? What is their experience with Moodle? What is their experience with the content that we've done? Am I doing this as an online assignment? Am I expecting them to do it face-to-face? A little bit of both. So kind of have what your context is. What level are you expecting them to do? So Bloom's taxonomy is looking at kind of the level of thinking. It starts with the basic of like describe, explain, the regurgitated material basically, all the way up to the top of the staircase, which is more that evaluation, creation, assessment, trying to figure out, usually the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy is much more a higher level of thinking. What are the learning outcomes that you want your students to be able to get to? And then do they have any prerequisites or any knowledge they have to have before they do this assignment? How much time is it going to take them? Do I have to give them any extra resources? Do they need a reading material? Do they have to watch a video ahead of time? And then so once you kind of built all of that and you have the background, the context, then what is kind of the learning and teaching approach that you're going to use? Is it cognitive? Is it more kind of knowledge-based? Is this more of a reflective activity? Is it more of an active? Or is it more problem-based? So you can kind of, there's lots of different, and these really are kind of just the learning theories. If you wanted to Google any of these, you would find all sorts of information and kind of a bit more direction on what exactly they are. But just kind of thinking, okay, what method would I want my students to use to try to get to that end point? And then again, the tasks. What are the kinds of things that I want my students to do? Are they communicating with each other? Is this a presentation kind of assignment? Are they producing something? Are they trying something new? Do they have a question they're experimenting and trying out, changing different variables to see how it affects it in the end? What kind of techniques could they be using? Are they needing to brainstorm with each other? Are they doing role plays? Are they doing debates? Do they need different kinds of tools? Do I have to make sure that they have access to a computer lab? Do they have the apps they need on their iPads? Can they use a laptop? Do they need to use specifically Excel or Sheets in Google? Are there specific resources I need to make sure that they have access to? And then are they interacting with me? Are they interacting with each other? Is it student to student? Am I expecting them to do a group assignment? Is this all whole class-based? So you can see there's lots of things you can start to think of when you start breaking down assignments into all the different things that, all the context, all the different things you could ask them to do. There's so much detail that you can get into with your assignments. What roles could they possibly play? And then once you've got all that piece figured out, what are the actual tasks they're doing in the assignment, then how are you going to assess it? So is it formative? Is it summative? So formative is more, well, summative is just at the end, kind of. So at the end of the assignment, is this like you just hand in the final project and you're marking it on that? Formative is more kind of assessing them as they do it throughout the activity. Maybe you're not even assessing it at all. Maybe you're giving them just an exemplar that they can compare themselves to. They kind of self-check their own work. Then what is the product you want them to make at the end? Are they doing an essay? Are they doing it as a written assignment? Are they actually producing and putting together an engine and they hand that into you? What is the actual thing you want them to do? Okay. So any questions on those? So, and it really, I know it looks overwhelming, especially when you go through all those different pieces. It's not meant to be oh my goodness, all this stuff to keep track of. It's just to show you that really when you get into assignments and activities, there's so many variables you can change. It's not just do this, hand this back in, I'm going to mark it. There's so many things you can change, especially if you're trying to build assignments that build on each other, or ones that places where you can give feedback to your students before they get to that final exam. So just some things to keep in mind, really. Okay, so from there, what I want to do now is move specifically into Moodle, into all the different things that Moodle can do to help you if you have decided you want to do class discussions, or if you want to do assignments, or if you want to do self-checks. These are the things that you can access in Moodle. We're going to talk about just a few of them. We've already talked about quizzes in last week's session, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but it is technically considered to be a learning activity within Moodle. Okay, so what I want to go through with this is just show you, and again, you'll get the PowerPoint, so you'll have this list, but what I've done is I've said, okay, what is the kind of activity you can do, and then in brackets behind it is the activity you would pick. to be able to do that. So asynchronous online discussions are where you would post a question to your students, and then you would say, okay, over the next 3 days, log in when you have a chance and answer the question. So asynchronous means that they're not all in at the same time. Synchronous means it's live, basically, that they would all be participating at the same time, answering each other's questions. Asynchronous would be one person would log in, answer the question, log out, the next person might come. So they're not really interacting with each other. They would post their answers, and then someone else might come in and read them, and then that person would leave. And so there's not really a lot of kind of live interaction in this one.
They're able to read previous answers.
Yes. Yeah. So they can interact with each other, but it's just not live.
Yeah. So unlike if I was to do something in Google Forms and submit the question with a link through Moodle, they go in, they'd answer the question, I get the results of the answer, but they can't see what everyone else is saying.
Yes. Yes, and you can do that in a Google form, or there is a way in Moodle that you can set up discussion forums that they have to post their answer first before they can see anybody else's thoughts. Okay. So it's, if you're worried that they're just going to read everybody else's and then just say, oh, I agree with Peter, then that's not really answering the question. They're just agreeing, or they're taking everybody else's answers and putting it into theirs. You can set it up so they have to come up with their own thought, and then once they do that, they submit it, then all the other answers show up. So. And really with a discussion forum, even though they are asynchronous and students are kind of coming in and they might not even be interacting with each other, you still want to have those carefully constructed questions where you're giving them a more open-ended question. You don't want to give them the question that everyone's going to have the same answer, because you might as well have just done it as an assignment or a quiz question. You also want to have questions that create more questions, where then they might come up with another question and students can answer those questions, things that would maybe get the discussion going. And it's not just, I put my answer in, I'm done. In some cases, maybe that's the way that you want to do it, but when you really want to get a discussion going, you want to try to ask questions that really kind of keep the thoughts going. If you are deciding to use discussion forums where it's one person responds and then somebody responds back to them and they have a conversation back and forth, you are going to have to facilitate that and kind of give them some tips and give them some pointers. You may have to model it at the beginning. You may have to respond. You might want to respond to the students' posts just to show the students the kinds of language and the kinds of questions that you might ask to kind of keep the conversation going so they get an idea of how to do this. This isn't easy, especially when students have never been involved in this kind of discussion forum before. It doesn't come naturally for some people to type a question and have a conversation where I put my thing in and then I have to come back 4 hours later to get someone's response. They want that immediate response. So you may have to facilitate it, set up some guidelines, model it a little bit, just so that you can show them what you're expecting of that. Again, you can do feedback. Either you can give feedback, written feedback, or you can rate them. You can go into discussion forums and give them, oh, you responded to 2 times, you were supposed to do 3, so I'm going to give you a 2 out of 3. Or you can 5 out of 5, whatever you want to rank them. You can give students feedback as a numerical score in their discussion forums. Okay, if you want to do a case study, you can either do this again as a discussion forum, maybe as students are discussing things back and forth, or you can have it as an assignment. And what Turnitin is it's basically an assignment, but it then takes the student's work and runs it and scans it against basically the whole internet. So really it's to check for students cheating, for plagiarizing. So if it's a written question, maybe it's an essay kind of a response, they have to write a few paragraphs. If you're concerned that your students are just going to be copying and pasting directly out of Wikipedia and you don't want them doing that, which we don't encourage them to do that, by putting it through Turnitin, not only does it scan it against existing websites, it also scans it against other students' work. So if you might have, maybe there's 2 courses running at the same time with 2 different instructors and you have very similar assignments, it will then compare students from class A against students from class B, because students might think, oh, they're 2 different instructors, how would they know that I stole this guy's answers and handed them in over here? It would run it against that. So yeah, and we've also seen it used. One student handed in the same assignment to 2 different instructors, and without Turnitin, this was before Turnitin, the instructors just happened to be chatting and it kind of came up in conversation that, oh, this student is in my comm class and all she ever talked about was horses, and then the equine instructor said, oh yeah, well she's in my equine course, and then they realized she had handed in the exact same assignment in both places. So again, Turnitin, by running your assignments through that, it would catch for those. So. Okay, so a case study is really where you're giving them a situation or a scenario and you're asking them some questions about it. It really gets deeper into thinking because it's more of a real life situation. And you could probably come up with lots of case studies from your own experiences of working in the industry, things you've seen, why do things break down, why does these things happen. Give the students those situations and scenarios, ask them to troubleshoot it and figure out what probably went wrong and try to figure out the answer. So again, it's nothing that you would probably throw at them the first day. Maybe you might, maybe to kind of pique their interest a little bit, see how much they might know, see if they can come up with some possible answers, and then you might throw that same scenario at them at the end of the semester or at the end of the course and see then if they're able to figure it out. So again, it's kind of getting into that application, that analysis and synthesis. If you do it in a forum, you can get them to post their answers, and then as students post different answers, then they can have a discussion about it. Students can go in and say, no, I don't think that would be the way that you would do it. I think you should do it this way, and then they could really get the conversation going. Group assignments, you can do basically the same kind of thing, but within a group. So within Moodle, you can have it in an assignment where they might all together work on it. One student can hand that in, and then you set up the group ahead of time. When one student hands it in for the group and you mark it, that mark then goes to all the students in that group. So, so you might want to give different groups different activities, different questions, and then that group then has to present that and share it to the rest of the class. If you're wanting them to share their thought processes of how they figured something out. And then a debate. Maybe you're giving them a bit of a controversial topic or an article, and then they have to take a position on it and argue their position. Just to go back up here, the wiki, that is similar to a forum, but it doesn't really track who it was that posted the answers in. So, and then other students can go in and edit other students' work. So you may want to give, like a wiki basically is a place where you can, it's kind of a little discussion board for a group to work in together. Then they may add things in, and then from there they create the assignment. If they're doing that kind of work, really they could be doing it as a Google Doc and just doing the collaboration of a Google Doc rather than a wiki inside of here. A wiki then just allows, since you've set it up, you still have access to it within Moodle. If they do their own Google Doc and collaborate, you can't get into it unless they invite you in, unless they share it in. So that you might make that a requirement in your class that, okay, if you guys are doing a group assignment, you're working on it together in Google, make sure you share it with me so I can monitor and help out and give you some feedback. If you do it as a wiki inside of Moodle, you don't have to ask them to share it with you. So that's just kind of, I guess, the pros and cons of doing them. You can upload videos in assignments and forums. If they have created something and put it on YouTube, they could share the link to you and hand that in. So don't think that in Moodle it has to be just assignments and activities that are like paper-based or a digital file, like a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet. There can be all sorts of different things that you might ask them to record a video using their phone or using your iPad, which everybody would have. Show me how you took this apart and put it back together. Hand that video in. So if you can't watch and observe every single group do it, that might be an option that you could do. So there's lots of ways that you can get students to share information back with you. Okay, I think I have a few left. So with activities, you can also have those self-checks. There we go. Okay, put that back. Okay, so self-checks would probably be done best with quizzes. And a quiz is just where you would create the questions. And a quiz doesn't have to be a quiz. You can do it as an assignment if you want to classify it as in their assignment mark rather than a quiz mark. Quizzes just mean that it's marked by Moodle. You create the individual questions Moodle can mark it for you. That's what it calls a quiz. Just like it says, it could be counted as an assignment if you want to in your gradebook. A Q&A forum, I've seen this used quite a bit in self-check activities. So what the instructor will do is they'll post the original question. Then the instructor will post an answer key, but they do it in the Q&A type of forum, which then students can't see anything that's been posted until they post their answers. So the student then posts their answers, hit submit. I think there's a 30-minute time window before everything opens up. They come back. Then they would see all the other students post, but they would also see the instructor's post, which is the answer key. So really Q&A works well for those self-checks, that if you want their students to kind of think things through, actually type it out, say it out in the discussion forum, then the teacher's post is what would be, they could self-check their own work. They could read the instructor's post and just compare it to see how they did. And then you can do an assignment where really it's just a participation mark. You could just say, if you hand something in and it's answering the questions, I'll give you 5 out of 5 marks. Then later on, and then you might tell the students, but I'm not really marking it. I'm not going in and assessing every word that you write. Later, I'm going to post an example of what all the right answers would have been. Please go and check your own work. So you can post that file later, and then the students can compare theirs against that. With online forums, and I'm not really going to go into this a lot, I'll just let you read this if you're going to be using these. It's really the question that you ask them. You want that open-ended question that's going to facilitate and allow for more conversation to go on. You want them to, you really want to encourage them to kind of keep going with the conversation, and try to find ways that they can pull things in from what you've talked about in the course into their answers in the post, especially when they're responding to other students' posts as well. So again, I'll just kind of leave this. You can decide how much you want to use this. I've just given you some tips and tricks on this slide. And then I've also, I think, yeah, make sure that you're in there too. If you respond and you get the students talking, then they're going to want to participate more. Here are some things that might help when you are coming up with questions. And then these are prompts, these are more questions to ask if you wanted to kind of get that conversation going further. So you ask the question, a student puts their response in, then you might say, oh, what is an example of that? Or can you explain this from another perspective? Can you explain this a little bit more to me? So you try to just ask questions that just pull a little bit more out of them. And really, you could use this, it doesn't have to be in a discussion forum. If this was an assignment, this might be the kinds of feedback questions you might want to ask them to try to get them thinking deeper or more about the topic. One of the biggest things with discussion forums is students really don't want to participate in them. Either they don't see the value of them, or it's worth so little, they're like, I'll just skip it. I don't need to worry about this. We'll talk about it in class. There's a really great article I found, and it was so good I put its own. The link, that's all it is on this slide, is just that link. I'll let you check it out after, but it gives you some reasons and ways to work on those reasons of why students don't want to participate in online discussions. This would even be applicable to your face-to-face courses as well. If you want to try to ask questions and get students to talk, everyone's quiet, nobody wants to say anything, there's probably some tips in there that would also help with that. All right, so Turnitin, I think I already talked about this. It just kind of gives you some of the technical details. It gives you a report at the end of like after you run the assignments through, and you can have it so the students get the report as well. They do this in their communication courses. So the students get a report and says, oh, 80% of this has been copied from somewhere else. Then it gives the student the chance, I better fix this because the instructor's going to see that it's 80% copied. I'm going to get in trouble for this. So if you let them run it in and turn it in ahead of time, then they can check it, see, oh, okay, I have a low amount of copying off the internet. I'm okay, or because I've cited everything properly, then I'm okay handing this in. So you can either use this without them knowing, or you can let them use it ahead of time, get the report, and then they can decide if they want to go back and fix up what they were handing in. There are a few limitations. It doesn't search everything. Of course, a few things are going to be missed, especially things in subscription databases like newspapers and magazines that you actually have to pay. So if the student has paid for the subscription but you haven't, you might not be able to actually, it won't run it against that. And there's some stuff in Wikipedia we found that doesn't quite catch, unfortunately, because that's probably where students would go first. But it might not catch it in Wikipedia, but a lot of stuff in Wikipedia comes from somewhere else anyways, because it's usually they've found other sources and then build the Wikipedia articles. So if it doesn't find it in Wikipedia, it usually finds it in the original source where Wikipedia got it from. So it's usually pretty good. We've tested it out. We've tried lots of just cutting and pasting and copying it from really random websites, and it's usually been pretty good about finding it. So you have that option if you're interested in using it. And you should, actually no, I take that back. You shouldn't use Turnitin without your students' knowledge ahead of time, because it stores a copy of their work in their database. That's then how they take, if another student a week later hands in the exact same thing, it stores it against what's in the database. So just for privacy issues, I don't think I'm not sure quite how it works with like that assignment came from that student and this one came from another student, but it will keep copies of all of that. So at least it would flag it and say another assignment from Olds College was handed in with this exact same text. I think that it might not say the students' names, but it would at least tell you this has been used before. So. All right, so then there's a few resources and references that you can check these out later. And so there's a few links there. Okay. So any questions on that? So that's kind of the theory behind all of this. Now what I would like to do is actually go into Moodle and just show you a few things in here, just some tips and things with building assignments. So if you have a Moodle course, or if you just want to follow along up here on the screen, you can. So what I've already done, oh, sorry, let's turn editing on. So in whatever block you would want to put your assignments or your activities, just add an activity or a resource. So in my list, when I had all those activities, that's what all of these are here. So assignments, chats, choice, database. If you want to try some of these, and if you're not like, what is a chat compared to a discussion forum? If you select it, then it gives you the information. It gives you a little blurb about it. So then in the box beside, on the right-hand side, that column then explains, and then say, well, that might be something that will work, or no, a discussion forum is what I need. I'm going to pick that one. So it gives you a fairly large description as well of what is in that activity. So I'm going to go into an assignment first. So we can add that. So you give the assignment its name. And you have to put in information where there is the red asterisk. So if there really is no instructions, you could even just copy and put the title of it again as the description. But chances are in here you're going to want to give them some instructions. What is the assignment they have to do? If you do have a separate Word document or a PDF or a link to something that you want the students to be able to, that they need to do the assignment, if you highlight this text in the description, these three little icons come open. If nothing's highlighted, they disappear. If I highlight it, this one on the left, where if I hover over it, it says Insert Edit Link, looks like a chain. If I click on that, if I have a URL that I want the students to go to, maybe there's a YouTube video I want them to watch, or it's a website I want them to read before they do the assignment, I can paste it in here. If it's a PDF or a file I want the students to do, if I click on this little, it's not very obvious what it is. It's kind of a blue and white square with little red lines inside. If you hover over it, it says Browse. Click on it. Then I can go and I can upload a file. So if I had a Google Doc I wanted them to access and just view it, if I had a file on the hard drive of my computer or on a memory stick, I can then upload and choose the file. So it was, again, you just highlight your text, and then as soon as you highlight it, those three icons pop open, and you want to insert or edit the link.
Okay, so where you put your description, I'm not seeing the same.
Oh, it might be because, so you're in Internet Explorer. and we find Internet Explorer, sometimes that toolbar disappears. So usually, Firefox and Chrome tend to be the best browsers. If you do, and even there's the odd time that we've been in Firefox and this toolbar has disappeared. If that's the case, log out, go try Chrome. Or if you're an Internet Explorer, log out and try Firefox. So if you run into these issues where, or if this all of a sudden is just a whole bunch of like HTML coding and you can't read it at all, log out, try a different browser. That's quite often the best fix is just a different browser. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. And usually Firefox and Chrome are the two that work the best. Internet Explorer is not working very well with Moodle lately. All right, yeah, so you just highlight it, select the link, put in the information. Yeah. Then in the assignment, you can then give when are things due. So you can have it that they can see that their assignment is coming up, but you won't take submissions until a certain date. Is it there now, Rick? Yeah. So yes, changing browsers can make a big difference. So you maybe have a due date that after a week, they have to get this handed in. The cutoff date, just as a difference between these, and remember you can always click on the little question mark beside any of these and it will give you just a little blurb about what that is. So cutoff date is kind of, you have to then give an extension. You will still accept the assignment, but you have to manually go in and let the student be able to hand it in. So it's kind of the due date, and then I still will give you a few more days to get this handed in, but then you have to come talk to me and then I'll let you hand it in. It's kind of what the cutoff date does. Having the students click the submit button, that kind of adds an extra step where they can hand it in almost as a draft. Then they can go in and edit it. If they might hand it in and say, no, that's not what I wanted to do, they can take it back out, they can change it, upload another copy until they hit submit. Then after they hit submit, then it's completely handed in. So
is that what you would utilize with Turnitin?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, then it gives them the option, exactly, to hand it in, run it through Turnitin. So then instead of, if you want to use Turnitin, you have to pick the Turnitin assignment right at the beginning of the activity. I can't change it. Once I'm into this page, I can't make this become a Turnitin assignment. I would have to go back and cancel out of here. I have to pick Turnitin assignment specifically. So, and the Turnitin assignment is very similar to just a regular assignment. It just adds that extra step of the assignment being run through Turnitin and then you can add in, there's some different settings and things with that goes along with it. And then this accept the submission statement is, it just kind of adds an extra. It says, are you sure you really want to hand this in? When you hand this in, it is complete and final. You don't get a chance to edit it. So it just kind of adds that extra confirmation that yes, they know this is the final copy, and that's it. Notifying the grader, that would be you. So would you get an email or a pop-up that somebody has handed in an assignment? And same thing with late submissions. If you are doing groups, you would turn this on and say students would submit in groups. And right now, I can't change the require all group members to submit. There's a few settings in here that you have to change one before it allows you to change the other. I think if I do, and I think it's there. So when I change this to require students to click the submit button and I pick a group, then I have the option of requiring all group members to submit it. So then each group, one group member would hand it in, but all group members would have to go in, log in themselves, and there'd be a submit button that they would click on. So it's just making sure that everyone in the group is okay with it and agrees that when Johnny handed it in, everyone else agrees that yes, it's okay what Johnny handed in. He's not trying to sneak something else in that we don't agree with. So yeah, it gives you lots of options of, especially with groups, of if one person hands it in and the others don't have to check it, basically. Online text is where it allows the students to actually type their answer in right within Moodle itself. File submissions are just attaching a file instead, which is usually the most common one. If you were wanting the students to give you the link, like maybe they make a YouTube video, then you could probably just turn this on to yes. Then all they have to do is copy and paste, grab their URL from their YouTube video, go into the assignment, there would be a box. They would just put that text in, hand it in that way. So that's probably the common thing we've seen with online text is when they have to hand in a URL to a website, it can be done there. You can decide how many files they hand in. You can limit that. Feedback comments, so you can add feedback. You can type in comments. Feedback files means that you can download their assignment, look at it, type in some comments, maybe add some things to it. Then you can hand that back through Moodle to your students. If you have this as no, you won't be able to hand anything back to them within Moodle itself. So I think that's kind of a neat feature. One thing that I wanted to point out, and when we talked about gradebook, just if you already have your gradebook set up, you can pick which category it's going to fall within. Maybe this is an assignment, maybe it's a project. You can have where it's going to go. Now with assignments, something that's really neat with this in the grading method is if you pick rubric, you have to turn that on first. And then if you had any group stuff, you could do that there, but I'm going to save this. Oh. So I've picked rubric. I'm going to save that. And then once I've done that, and I go into here, then once I click on the assignment, and then I'm going to go over into this thing called advanced grading. So it's in the settings block. And from here, I can create a rubric that I'm going to use to mark against that assignment. So if I want to, I'm going to do a new one from scratch. So I'm going to choose that one. And then maybe this is my engine rebuild. So if I want to give myself a little blurb about it, I can. And then here is where I would add in the things that I'd be marking for. So maybe the first thing I do is I'm marking on their safety. So the first thing would be, so 0 marks would be uses no safety procedures. Then for 1 mark, maybe it's used only safety glasses. Or so you could go through and figure out what are all the different things that you would expect them. What would be worth 1 point? What would they do to get 2? You could add more levels, 3, 4. Then you might add the next criterion. Maybe the next one is tool use. How well did they use the tools? And in this case, maybe you're only marking it out of 2. So this thing you can then have up to 2 points. And then maybe there's another criterion. Does the engine actually run? Maybe it's just yes, it does, or no, it doesn't. So we completely get it. Yeah.
For how long?
Yeah.
Let's keep in mind that we only have
The most highly skilled technicians working on our stuff.
So you can see that it doesn't have to be like 4 points for everything. Like this one had 4, this one only had 2, this one only had 1. Yeah.
as well as safety part though, but.
Okay, so once you have the rubric put in, unfortunately, kind of as the instructor, you don't quite see it the way the students do. And I'm going to quickly log out to show you what it looks like when the students are in here. So I've created these things. I've named it what I need to name it. I save it and make it ready. Oh, I am just going to. Doesn't want these to be empty. See if that will do it. There we go. All right, so my rubric is done, and then right here it says I'm ready for usage. So then you would get your students to hand it in, whatever they need to hand in for the assignment. Then how it looks, I'm going to go back. I have one made up here. I did this one earlier. I went in as my demo. I handed it in. So I handed in, my file has been submitted for grading. Now I'm ready to grade this. So I click on the little grade icon. Now as the instructor, all I have to do is say, yeah, they got 2 out of 2 on that one and 2 out of 3 on that one. And I would just go through and I would just click on those. And then if I need to give any feedback or anything, and then I just save my changes. And that student got 80 out of 100. So it's the upfront work of building your rubric. You need to make sure and you'd want to be very clear with your students what constitutes a mark out of 1, what is a mark out of 2, a mark out of 3, what would be the top, what would be the least. But then if you have all that done up front, it makes your marking so much more fair, because then you know you're marking every student the same. That this student, well, I thought this was a 3 out of 3, but then I forgot for this student, I had changed my mind. And it just makes it very consistent across the board that you're marking everybody's work the same. Then you've got that to kind of back yourself up, because if a student comes and, well, how come I got an 80 and she got an 85? Then you can go into the rubric and see exactly which things that you decided were where they got their marks. So you can do a rubric right within Moodle, or you can do it outside. If you can even do it as a Google form. You can set up rubrics. If you just want to do a paper copy, just circling what's the 2 out of 3 here and a 3 out of 4 here, and then just add up the mark and put it as a manual item into your grade book. But this is just, I thought it was kind of a neat way to do it, that then it automatically just takes the marks and immediately puts it into the grade book. So if you're doing a rubric anyways, you might as well, and you're doing an assignment in Moodle, why not build it that way? So what the student sees, if you just give me a sec here, I'll go in as my demo. And that was this one, assignment with a rubric. Then since this has now been marked for me, I see that this is what I got 2 out of 2 on, this is what I got 2 out of 3 on, and it gives, I can see that now as the student. Before, even when I didn't hand this, I handed it in, but I hadn't marked it yet, the student view sees the rubric too. So the students then also know how you're going to mark it. It's very upfront. As soon as when they go to hand it in, they're like, oh, okay, well, this is how they're going to mark it. So I better make sure I have everything that needs to be in there.
Now, can this marking be made blind?
I think you can actually. Let me just go back in as
Because if we're talking about consistency, that takes all subjectiveness out of it, right?
Yeah.
I want to say there is, I think because I've already started marking this, let me go back to one I haven't done anything in yet. I'm pretty sure there is a blind marking. Blind marking.
Okay.
Yep. So you can turn that on, and what does it have to say? So it hides the identity of students to markers. Blind marking settings will be locked once a submission or grade has been made. So as soon as you mark one, you can't go back and change it. That's why it was stuck on no, because I'd already marked something. But yep, it should take off any, so Moodle will know who the student is that gets the mark. But when you go in to see, so what that would look like then is when you go into an assignment where students have handed stuff in, like in this one, and you go to view grade all submissions, instead of saying all the students' names, it probably just says like student 1, student, like it probably just has some other identifier, but it would take out their name. Yeah. Okay, so those are assignments. Again, you can do kind of whatever settings you need with those. The other one that I wanted to go through is a discussion forum. Assignments, quizzes, and discussion forums are probably the most common that we see people use. Games, you can use them, but I find if you're giving them just because it's something to do, that's really not a lot of value. I think if it's something, especially if you have a lot of terminology or definitions or vocabulary in your courses that the students just need to practice, 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 then some of these games have their value. But if it's just busy work, they're probably going to think some of these things might be a little juvenile. So it's just something to keep in mind. They are a lot of work, especially when you're doing anything to do with like a word and its definition. You have to put in all those terms and basically build a glossary. So make sure it's something that you kind of see the value of it, that they actually would get that return on attention out of it. All right, so with the forum, you have to give it a name, you have to give it some instructions. This forum type is where you would have the options. So a simple single, and actually if you just click on the little question mark, it explains what they are for you. So the Q&A is the one that I was talking about, where students must first post their perspectives or their answers before it will show anybody else's. So you as the instructor can give the instructions, then you can go back in, actually post to it, put in the answer key or whatever your thoughts are on the topic. Then the students won't be able to see any of that until they post. So that's what we actually see a lot of instructors use that one for. They can't cheat off each other. They can't look at what everybody else put for answers and then put those in. That's what the rest of these basically do. It just kind of gives you some different options. Like each person has to start their own discussions. Maybe if you want them to be putting their own original question or own original thought up, then you would put each person posts one discussion. Standard forum for general use is anyone can start a new discussion at any time. They can do as many as they want. So there's lots of options that you can pick in there. But if you're doing it as a self-check, or even if it's a discussion forum, but you want them to put their thoughts in first, I would recommend that Q&A would probably be the one to use. And then there's a few options that you can pick for it. You probably would want to turn on the read tracking. Then that shows, as people come in, as they log into Moodle, they would see that they have one unread post in that forum and 3 unread posts in another. Just flags or highlights the discussion forums that have had some action in them since you have been in. So that's a good one to have. If you want to make that the students have to be subscribed to this, so subscription mode just gives you, like it says there, they receive email copies of forum posts. So if it's a forum that you want everyone to be notified when somebody else posts in it, then you would force everyone to be subscribed to it. They would get an email notification when other students post in there. And then auto subscription would be if they post, then they become subscribed. So there's a few options there too. You can have them add attachments. So rather than just typing in their answers, they could maybe upload a file instead. Then once you have decided that maybe you do want to mark this and you decide you're going to put it maybe as an assignment, then the aggregate type is you can then, if you want to have them average, so maybe you're marking multiple posts of theirs, average those marks together. How many times are they posting? What's the maximum? What's the highest mark they get is the one that counts. So if you add them up, so however you decide that you're going to do it, then once you pick that, you can then, the scale opens up and you can decide which one you want to use. So a pass fail, do not use the do not use one, it's backwards. If you pick pass, they get a 0, and if you pick fail, they get 2 marks. So, and we weren't able to delete it, so we just changed the name to do not use, so that's why. If you want to use just you get a mark if you've done it, you get a 0 if you don't. You can use the fail pass, or you can scroll down and say, well, no, I actually want to mark this out of 10 marks. Then you can pick whatever scale you want to use. And then you can say, well, I'm only marking from, so really once the 12th hits, I'm done with this. So then Moodle will automatically at 4:50 on October 12th, we'll take the average of all the ratings for each student and put it in the gradebook. You don't have to then go in and manually add them all up. It knows the deadline of when you might still have it open, that students can still participate, but you're not marking any more things after that date, and you've told Moodle add up and figure out the final mark at this point in time. You can also do groups, and I think we'll do groups. I'm not sure if that's the order, but I'm going to change it, and we're going to do groups next week. And you can then have it so that maybe different groups get different discussion questions. So maybe students that are from, especially we see in communication courses where they have, it's COM 1020, but we have equine students, HT students, some of the ag students are in there. Then the instructor can give questions specific to those students, and they can work on it together as a group. You can make it visible or hidden. So if you're in that group, if you make it hidden or separate groups, You can only see the link to that activity if you're a member of that group. If you don't belong to that group, you don't even see what the question is. If you make it visible, they can see each other's questions, they can see each other's posts, but they can't go in and join another discussion group. They can just read them. So that might be one if you wanted just to limit the discussion to only a smaller group of students, but you still want to encourage them to go and see what everybody else is talking about, then a visible group would be the one to use. And then you can restrict the access of when they can use it. And then if this is something you want to save, and then make sure you give it the name and the instructions as well. Okay, so that is kind of the activities, the big ones in Moodle. Do you guys have any questions?
Well, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about the fact that our contract states we have to have evaluation every class.
Yep.
And we've lost Merlin. Why couldn't we set one up in this for student evaluation of the course and instructor?
Yes, and I think there actually is one that we can add in. But if you did want to do an informal one, you could do it as a Google form and link it in here as well. But you could also do, yeah, especially if you wanted them to be anonymous.
Right.
Yes.
And that's where, like, Merlin was anonymous and it graphed it out for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and it still could even be a Google form, but if you had, say, someone else, like if somebody else owned it and then the results went to maybe someone like Carol or something in your office, where then she would then compile all that information and give it back to you so that you're not the actual, so then when students go in, they don't have to worry about you being the owner of that you could reassure them that you've just provided the link, it actually exists in the Office of School of Trades, then they are going to provide you with that information after the course is done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is their review completely anonymous, or the way it was before, or was there actually ways on the previous system?
The ones I've seen, I mean, unless Carol.
I just wondered, could
Yeah.
Dan actually or Keith go in there and actually see who wrote what?
No, because
No.
they don't get a copy of it.
Oh.
No.
It's meant to be completely anonymous.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you would
That's how
still,
you can get a true feedback.
You get
Mhm.
11 students
Yeah.
responding, maybe you had 12, which in one case I did. One guy's computer packed it in before he finished it, so it just tossed that one. And it gives you that
Yeah.
rating.
I'm just meaning it was, so you still wouldn't, with forms, you still wouldn't have true anonymity because somebody is still the owner of that.
You would, depending on who it goes to. If it goes to Carol,
Right, but you
Yeah.
could go to Carol and say like.
But if you turn
I
off
know
in,
box number 2 is.
but inside of the form, as long as you turned off that it doesn't track that who the Old College username is,
Right.
then it should be completely
Then it would be
anonymous.
same as
Yeah.
blind marking would be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone.
You
Yeah.
can't set up something directly. You can't, let's say, what if you created it as an assignment? Rate my performance as an assignment in Moodle. Can you have can you have submissions without usernames?
And I think if
Like
you
a
had the
blind
blind
submission.
marking turned on, but then you could probably figure out that if, like, okay, I knew I gave this student a 10 and this student gave me a 10 and this student gave me a 0, and then later on I go in and, like, I guess if it was somehow not tied to the grade book too, but I think it's,
Like a non.
yeah, I don't-
Assignment.
no,
Far better off to have it owned by somebody else.
yes,
Yeah.
I think so.
And why? I mean, the whole purpose is to improve yourself, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying, just keep it, that way you're just keeping it in your Moodle
Yeah.
course rather than having external.
Yeah, I
But
think there
The other thing
was.
you did mention was the concept of even an informal one, where you tell the students, I want to know how things are going for you. I'm setting up this Google form, which, I can set it up so I don't know who is responding to it. But tell me what questions you're having that aren't answered and what's working, what's not working in the class.
Mhm. So you can do it as a Google form, but there is a thing in here called feedback, which does a very similar thing, and then it keeps it all within Moodle itself.
Okay.
We found, though, it's hard to, if you ever wanted to export it out as a document that you would want to work with, we find it's kind of hard to do anything with. But if it was just, like you said, where you just want to give some informal feedback or ask the students to give you feedback of like, how do you feel you're doing in the class? Are you able to keep up? Is it too much work? Not enough? Is this too easy, too hard? You could do that as a feedback inside of Moodle. Or you could do it as a Google form, give them the link and ask them the exact same questions. Yeah. And then in your Google form, right at the very top, there's the option to uncheck it so that it doesn't, if you uncheck the use or collect Old College username, uncheck that, and then it would be completely anonymous. But then that kind of feedback isn't like rate me as an instructor. It's just let me know how things are going in the class. Like it's really not something you're going to use in your later evaluations that you have as an instructor. So
or something that partway, you know, okay, I'm a week into this 133 now. What can I do to, you know?
Well, yeah, am I meeting your needs? What can I do to change to help?
Right.
Yes.
And you can use it to, okay, well, now we gotta, okay, I know I have my schedule set up that tomorrow I'm doing nothing but cutting equipment, but okay, someone's still, a couple of people are still stuck back here. So I can go back there and review it a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's definitely you want to build those kinds of, is it just asking them right out front, like, are you having trouble with this? Or giving them the kinds of activities that from the feedback and how well they do on it gives you an idea. So maybe you give them a little quiz at the end of the day, and if they completely bomb it, it's like, well, I had planned to go on to another topic, but we're going to go back and finish this again because obviously they weren't ready to move on. So yeah. So there's lots of, yeah, but it's just that, it's really that feedback piece of you giving them feedback, but they also, you using them to give you feedback so you can see where they're at in the class. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.